Hi, Allison.
Hi, Kim.
Welcome to the Lunch and Learn, and everyone else who is here. We'll give people a minute to come on the call, and feel free to say who you are and where you're from as you jump on either YouTube or Facebook. And welcome. This is our Lunch and Learn series, and I'm Kim Reynolds, and I'm the founder of Mind Over Mountains. And it's a company that specializes in personal and professional development. And currently our foundational program is the Peak Leadership Experience, which is designed for women who want to learn more skills and gain more confidence to move up the leadership ladder. And we started these Lunch and Learn, these live events, because I wanted to invite extraordinary women who live unique lives to share relatable stories about their professional experience. So if you tuned in last time, we had Kari Brandt, and she talked about building women up in a male-dominated industry and how we can use our voice to encourage others. That was a lot of fun. And our guest this week is Alison Chun. Did I pronounce that right? I was going to ask you. It is Chun, right?
Yep.
Chun or Chun?
Chun.
Okay, good.
Yep.
Never want to do that wrong. And her topic today is finding her voice, learning to be empowered and confident enough to speak up. So really great topic. And I think a really important topic for women is to find our voice. And Allison, let me introduce Allison a little bit. You work as the Assistant Director of Adventure Sports at Stanford University. Mm-hmm. And you believe in the power of experiential education and helping students to learn more about themselves and the world around them through outdoor experience. You instruct rock climbing, sea kayaking, as well as mountain biking and backcountry skills. So what an exciting job. What a fun job. That would be like a dream job.
Yeah, it is.
So what drew you? Well, welcome, first of all, welcome, Allison. Really happy to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And just to mention, you were a participant at Peak Leadership, at the Peak Leadership Experience, and that's where we met each other when we did a 6-month program together. So That was really, really fun. So what drew you to your job at Stanford?
Yeah, well, I think kind of what you said, it's kind of a dream job. It's, I had previously been working for a different outdoor company as a supervisor and guide, and it was much more focused on, profit and, margins and things like that. And I realized that I kind of missed having more prolonged experiences with the participants and students that I was working with. My previous job, it was like day excursions that lasted maybe 4 to 6 hours. And I think that's great. And it's a great way to, introduce people to outdoor activities and get them involved. But I was really missing that deeper connection and having a lot of time with people to really see their growth and help them really develop their skills. So that's kind of what drew me to the position. I also realized that I missed working with a younger age group, working with students. In previous jobs, I've also worked with middle school, high school students, and I really liked that. But I think it's just something about being part of that developmental and the formative years of people's lives that I was really craving that kind of interaction.
Yeah, it sounds like you really want to have that profound impact with people, and it really takes some time and relationship to get there. What inspired you to choose the topic of finding your voice for our discussion today?
Yeah, it's been about 1.5 years I've been at this job, and it really feels like I've been on a journey to recover my confidence and find my voice and kind of figure out my place on my team. So I started working at this position a few months before COVID, obviously changed everybody's lives, and that was, a jarring experience for everybody. But I went from, as I mentioned, working as a supervisor and a guide for a big for-profit company into this university setting. And to be honest, onto a team that had some pretty deep issues that still needed to be resolved. And then to complicate matters, when I got this job over an internal candidate who did not take that very well, and who I had to share an office with for the first several months. So I literally spent the first day on my job defending my qualifications to this person, and the next several months feeling like I had to prove that I was worth being here or worthy of being here. And then the pandemic hit, and that ground everything to a halt and forced everyone to stay home. And I think the rifts among the team kind of grew even worse. And throughout all of that, Several of our team members actually ended up leaving, including my rival / office mate, and things felt like really disjointed. And so, feeling that, I lost a lot of my confidence, and I felt like I was really struggling to figure out how I fit into our team and our work. And I didn't really even have a good sense of what my job was going to be, because COVID just ruined everything, and all those, interpersonal dynamics were at play. And it was just really hard for me to kind of get my feet under me and kind of start, fulfilling the role that I was hoping I would have.
And what's been helping you to find your place at work?
Well, one thing that really helped was actually participating in the Peak Leadership Program over the summer that, happened right in the middle of all of this stuff, when I really felt like I was underwater and kind of searching for my way and trying to get back to who I felt like I was. And it really helped me tap into parts of myself and my identity that I just had been neglecting for a while.
It was really good timing for you, wasn't it? Because here you are, you come into this position where you're supposed to take people outdoors, and everyone's stuck inside. So you really had a good opportunity for some personal development as you came into, that initial awkward sort of situation. What were some of the topics that you benefited most at Peak Leadership?
Yeah, I think I benefited a lot from the work that we did around telling our own personal stories, a lot of the personal development. So defining our values, our strengths identification, and then really diving into the deep listening and asking good questions, topics that we covered.
It's so interesting because I do a lot of leadership trainings, and I'll stand up in front of a room and say, okay, raise your hand if you know what your values are. And everyone raises their hand, and I'm like, okay, who can tell me their top few values? And no one raises their hand. So why was that activity of identifying your top 5 values, why was that so powerful for you?
I think, being able to give voice to that, exactly as you're saying, really identifying what they are, because you might have a vague idea of what's important to you, but once you put the words to it, it really helps you stick to things. So one of the things I was having a lot of trouble with at work was, speaking up about those things that were important to me. And it seemed a lot of times that my other people on my team were either overlooking them or not as interested or invested in, making that happen for our programs. And I'd also often have this nagging feeling that I should be saying something or asking more questions. But if the opportunity came up, I found that I would be really quiet about it. And that was actually a new thing for me. I'm not usually that kind of person. I'm usually the one who asks important and difficult questions, and I share my opinion pretty openly. But I think that just all the changes and the hits to my confidence, I just wasn't feeling able to do that. And then doing all the personal work in Peak Leadership, for one, was pretty emotional for me because I was in a tough place. But the exercises on identifying our values and crafting our value statement really helped me speak those things. And now I have them, and I can, when I am faced with a situation where I feel like I should be speaking up or I have that nagging feeling, now I can look at my values and say, okay, is this something like, am I going to make a decision that can be in line with my values? Or, how can I take action to make these values real and really live them? And I think having that value statement was really important to me because it was like actionable, and it was how I can live my values.
Isn't it interesting that when we don't want to speak up, we lack confidence, right? So, they kind of go hand in hand. When you want to have your voice and voice what's important to you, but you lack the confidence, sometimes we freeze. So, love that you were really standing in your values and what's most important to you. And then I want you to talk a little bit more about how that helped you in decision making by knowing what's most important to you. You just mentioned that it was easier to make decisions. How do those connect?
I do have my value statement is right here on my work bulletin board. So it's literally in front of me when I'm thinking about anything that I'm doing at work. And so they're my guiding principles, they're my foundation. And so when I'm facing a decision, I can look at my value statement and say, okay, is this decision, if I make X decision, is it going to help me live towards these values and help me enact them? Or, is it going to take me away from these things or help me, not help me uphold, for example, integrity is one of mine, and fairness. So anytime I'm making a decision, let's say around like my employees, I can think about, is this going to be a fair or, just or equitable decision that I'm making that will be good for everybody? Having them listed out and having my value statement it's just my guiding principle. And anytime I'm making a decision or trying to decide, a direction for programming or for the decisions I'm making at work, those are the things that I can fall back on and make sure that they're helping me live and be the person that I want to be.
Mm. And I love that, because it all kind of comes together, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how is this giving you more confidence, and how does that show up for you at work?
Yeah. Like I mentioned, I was definitely lacking a lot of confidence as I transitioned, and part of that had to do with being at an institution that was really high caliber, and wanted to make sure that I was like living up to that standard. Part of it had to do with that coworker who didn't think I was qualified for the job. Thankfully, that person didn't stick around very long after I got hired. We did have to work together for a few months, which was challenging. But I found that they were really resistant to working with me, wouldn't put much effort into helping me get adjusted or really anything, kept me at a really far distance. And when we had to work together in some situations, I had to remind myself that I did have enough experience to be doing what I'm doing. I also made sure to like double check with my boss or our boss that the decisions I was making were in line with our program goals and what she was expecting. So having another person as that sounding board was really helpful for me.
You know what else I loved about what you said in our conversation about gaining confidence was one thing that really helped you was being more vulnerable with your boss.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I want to hear more about that.
Yeah, I mean, when you're the new person on the team and you don't really have anyone else to go to, I tend to go to the boss because they're the ones who's in charge. And so, it really helped me to talk to my boss about my insecurities, especially with this other coworker. And when I talked to her, she made it clear that she had great confidence in me and that she would support me in my decision making any way she could. And it was really tough for me to open up, to your boss about being insecure about something about your job that they're overseeing you. But she was really understanding, and knowing that she supports me is super helpful in anything that I'm, taking on at work now.
How I got to thinking as you were talking about your female boss, how much do you think your vulnerability to be vulnerable with your boss had to do that she was a woman?
I think it's huge. I know not everybody has that situation, but I think just knowing that she is also a female identifying person who's gone through the outdoor industry and has worked her way into a director role, I know that she understands some of the stuff that I've going through. And to be quite honest, it was probably harder for her when she was going through it because she went through it much earlier than me. And I think times have changed a lot so that there are more women in the outdoor industry these days. And thankfully, I've had the great privilege of working in a lot of positions where women are in leadership in the outdoor industry. So I've gotten to see or benefit from their previous struggles. But I think she was really empathetic with me because she had been there, probably even worse in a worse situation than I had been. So in that regard, I think it was, even though I was like, oh gosh, I don't want to tell my boss about these insecurities, I think it was easier for me because I knew that she had probably gone through something like this before and had that perspective to be able to support me through it.
I actually didn't know until now that you had a lot of female leadership. How has that influenced you to lead?
I think, I don't know that it's been a little bit maybe subconscious. I feel really privileged because I kind of expect it, which I know is not the case. And I haven't yet been in an area where it's really heavily male dominated. So I'm not sure what would happen if I entered into an area like that. So I guess it's influenced me to expect a different kind of leadership than you often think about or see in, outdoor industry or the outdoor education industry. So it's kind of what I look forward to having, and hopefully I can help create those kinds of environments where there is more female leadership, or at least more equity between male and female leadership.
Yeah, it's so important obviously for women to have female role models along their way. You mentioned that as you were talking more about your vulnerabilities, you also uncovered your strengths. How did these play into each other?
Yeah, one of the things actually, again, in peak leadership that we did was to do the standout assessment and identify our top 2 strengths in the workplace. And that actually was really helpful for building my confidence too. So while I had these vulnerabilities and I was sharing them with my boss, I was also discovering what my strengths were through the standout assessment. And after identifying those two strengths, which for me are the creator and provider type, I was able to lean into them more and search out opportunities to act on those strengths. And so I noticed a lot of the work that I had already been doing really aligned with those things. And it helped me feel good about what I was doing or what I am doing. And I think it's kind of similar to those values things, right? It might be this like perception of like, I kind of know what I'm good at and things I like to do. But once you have a name and sort of a definition for it, it really gives you something concrete to work towards, or to make sure that when you're doing your work, you're trying to support those or highlight those strengths.
Yeah, it's like you really get to step into them.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the great thing, so Standout is an assessment tool that really, once you combine those two strengths, that like your creator and provider, it's your unique edge in the professional world. It's, you know, you capitalize on those two, then you bring so much more of your gifts and talents to the workplace. So I love that and this is usually true because the assessment is generally pretty right on, that it identifies not only what people are good at, but what they love to do, and gives them energy, and how that really helps us rise into those and go, yes, this is my place in the world. So I love that one resonated with you too. Let's go into the topic of confidence, because all this is like building confidence slowly, right?
Yeah.
How you mentioned something about people's perceptions of you and how that has sort of affected your confidence.
Yeah, this has been kind of an interesting thing that I've also been discovering over the past year or so. But something I've noticed playing into my level of confidence is what I think other people's perceptions of my confidence is. And I guess that's kind of a confusing statement. But what I mean by that is like, I very much do not fit and actively try to break the mold of traditional leadership, or the traditional picture of leadership, which, you know, is often very strong in the heavily male-dominated industries like the outdoors. And that traditional picture of leadership being one where the leader is making decisions and telling people what to do, and, you know, doesn't seem to need other people's help or input with things, or it's maybe rare if they ask for input. And I do not do this unless I have to, unless it's really necessary in some situations. I have a much more collaborative approach to making decisions and managing people that I oversee. I like to get input from everyone who might be affected by a decision, and I really value hearing different perspectives, and, you know, try to consider different approaches to work and, you know, different ways to make decisions. But I think sometimes that can appear as me lacking confidence in myself, because it's not, you know, the traditional structure that people are used to seeing. I think sometimes when you ask for people's opinions, they might think that like you don't have your own opinion on this, and so they feel the need to fill that in or fill that space. And I've tried explaining this to my team at work, how I work and how I like to make decisions. And I think most of them understand it, but I do sometimes still feel that others question me, or sometimes when I'm asking an opinion, they'll assert their own over mine if they sense that might be a lack of confidence. And so, you know, when that happens in those times, I try to assure them that I am comfortable and confident in making decisions and like taking my own actions, you know, even going so far as saying like, I'm going to make this decision. I'd like to hear what you have to say, but I'm going to make this decision. And something, Kim, you actually mentioned to me last time we were chatting, was recommended to like kind of positively reinforce that approach, maybe a little bit differently than I have in the past, but saying something like, I'd like to take a collaborative approach to this project or this task, and just highlight that different skill. Because, you know, collaboration is one of those buzzwords that people are looking for. And I think it can be really hard to see it authentically interacted. And so when I'm making decisions and approaching work, I really do try to get input from people. But yeah, I think just sometimes because of how often people see a different form of leadership, it's not viewed as a confident form of leadership.
You know what I like about what you're saying is, as a leader, you get to introduce how you want to lead. Like you can actually frame a situation of like, I'd like to approach this collaboratively, or I'd like to hear your opinions, to front load it so they're not trying to guess what your approach is. So I like that front loading piece of, you know, we don't have to have people guess what we're trying to do. So you were mentioning that in trying to find your place that you're still working on this, and then it dawned on me that isn't it true that wherever we go, whatever we do, we try to find our place in that moment. And I think, this is just human nature that we want to feel like we belong, right? And so like, am I in or am I out? So
Yeah.
it's interesting to me that, you're still playing with that. So now that you're a year into your job with more experience behind you, what does finding your place mean now?
It's definitely still a work in progress, as you said. I'm still kind of figuring it out. And I think that's okay. I mean, there's been so much change that I don't think if I had found my place a year ago, it'd be the same place that it is today. But yeah, my immediate team has had a lot of turnover, and even the greater department that I'm working within has had a lot of turnover in the past 6 months to a year. So I think a lot of us are still in that like forming stage of our development, in our group development. And I think most of us are still trying to figure out our position or our place on our team. Within my immediate team, I have noticed that we have a lot of unproductive triangular relationships, which is something we delved into in peak leadership.
Would you like to tell the audience what an unproductive triangle is?
Yeah. So
moment.
so in peak leadership, we talked about relationships a lot and what happens to relationships when stress is introduced to the system. And so if you might have a relationship between two people, but when a stress factor is introduced, one of those people might try to rope in a third person. And oftentimes those relationships can become unproductive because that third person becomes either, the gossip corner, or it ends up being that two people are taking sides against another person, or it's just a place for one person to vent, and it's not really being worked. The issue is being kind of side skirted, or you're not really addressing the issue. And so I noticed a lot of that happening at work. And it's an unproductive triangle is when that third person who's roped in is just that sounding board or just that gossip corner and doesn't have any other role in helping to resolve the issue. But you can turn that into a productive relationship where that third person could potentially help mediate a situation, or could be more of a reflection and help the person who came to them go back to the situation and try to figure it out. So I oftentimes I found that two people would be coming to talk to me about the same issue, and obviously not talking to each other about it, or at least not talking to each other as candidly about it as they were speaking to me. And when this first started happening, I wasn't aware of these triangular relationships, so I didn't really know what was happening. And at first, I really took it as kind of a compliment that my coworker would come and confide in me, or was seeking out my opinion on a matter. But then I realized, after going through the peak leadership module on relationships and these triangular relationships, I realized that I was often in this receiver end of the relationship that wasn't being turned into something productive. And so now with this perspective, I'm much more careful about my interactions when that happens, and how I engage with my coworkers in a situation where I think that there might be a triangular relationship developing. And now, instead of just listening or feeding into that unproductive nature, I can encourage the two parties involved to talk to each other, or say, hey, this sounds like something that you should say this to the other person. So I can shift the relationship a little bit.
I love how you said, well, one way I have found my place now is by helping people resolve these issues, and to help someone turn it around into a more productive. So that was such a great description of triangle relationships.
I learned it well.
Well, and then once you realize, you learn the concept of triangles, you realize they're everywhere. And for some reason, a lot of them can be unproductive, and sort of that, place to gossip or download, like you were saying.
Yeah, I think even in the workbook that we did for peak leadership at this point, I said, I don't think I have any triangular relationships. And then on reflection, I was like, oh, there's a lot of these here.
Well, and I love that with your new awareness, your new perspective, that you saw that instead of getting caught up in them, you could help turn them around. So and it is our human nature to get caught up in the human drama.
Yeah.
So I love that. So one thing I want to ask you, as an outdoor educator in the outdoor field, you mentioned it's never too late to get started. So what would be your biggest piece of advice for people who want to get into outdoor sports?
I think that's it. It's never too late. I definitely don't have the like traditional background for somebody working in the outdoors. I
Uh-huh.
didn't grow up camping with my family. I wasn't exposed to like climbing or anything at a young age. And I really didn't even discover my love of the outdoors until I was in graduate school. And even then, I didn't consider it as a career until several years later. So sometimes I feel like I'm playing catch up because I don't have that, really traditional background of having spent my childhood in the outdoors. And sometimes that feeds into my lack of confidence. Like sometimes I feel maybe I don't qualify to be in this profession because I haven't lived my whole life in the woods. And that's something that I've come to terms with. But I think I've been trying to speak out about my experience a little bit more often because I think it's really important to highlight the fact that there are different ways to get into the outdoors and that not everybody has to go through, a traditional outdoor upbringing with lots of family members who are active in the outdoors and having that really young exposure. Um, and I would say that there tends to be a lot of ego in the outdoor industry and a lot of people measuring each other's qualifications against a specific standard that really might not be realistic for everyone who aspires to work in the outdoors. It does take time and effort. It's super important to have solid foundational skills in the technical sports that you might be pursuing. But those can be built, there's not a cap on the timeline to learn those skills. So I think it's really important to start. If you're interested, get out there and take a class to start building those skills and start finding some friends who can help you, mentor you a little bit. I know mentorship is talked a lot about in the outdoors, and so far, I haven't found that it's like traditional, like you are my mentor and I am the mentee and we're going to like learn things together. But there's a lot of informal mentorship that happens in terms of just learning from people who are experienced and taking any opportunity you can to get out there and practice your skills and really hone those skills because they are, super important. But there's also, a lot of ways to be involved with the outdoor industry that's not necessarily being a guide or the mountain person. There's lots of ways to support outdoor work administratively or being involved with community groups that might do stuff at like a lower risk level. So you don't have to have a super, super high skill level in terms of the technical skills. And there's just a lot of stuff out there, a lot of volunteer opportunities to get out and, take kids outdoors is something that's super fulfilling to me sometimes. We're working with students who are, developing their personalities and their views on life and stuff like that. But yeah, there's a lot of ways to get involved, and being a guide is just one of them.
Yeah, you're such a great example, Allison, of many things of a female leader at a prestigious university teaching outdoor skills and being truly a mentor to your students. And so and I really appreciate your vulnerability and to be able to just speak to your experience and who you are and to be able to go to your boss and say, yeah, here's where you can help.
Yeah, I think that's really important too. If you're getting into the outdoors, is like being a little vulnerable. Like you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you haven't, disclosed that you don't have a certain skill set, and then you're like, oh dear, I can't do this. So being vulnerable about like where you need to develop is super important.
Because people want to help, right? Like I know when I got into the outdoor industry in my 20s, I felt like I had to fake it till I make it and had to buck up and be tough and not say when I'm scared or vulnerable. And how refreshing, because really we all want to help each other.
Yeah.
To be better and have fun and be safe out there. So I want to take this, thank you. I want to take this opportunity to open it up to any questions. Put in your name and where you're from and your question. And meanwhile, while we're waiting for the questions come in, Alison, I have another question for you. What would you say to women who are thinking about doing something like the Peak Leadership Experience?
I think it's absolutely worth it. I was, I kind of, when I saw this posted on Facebook, the Peak Leadership Experience, I was like, maybe I should do that. And there was like something in my brain that was like, you really should do this. So I just went ahead and did it. And it was a really great decision. I think the thing that's really good about Peak Leadership is that it makes you think about these things in a way that you don't usually get to in your everyday life. Just like, with the values or with your strengths. It's really a focused way to think about values, strengths, relationships, how you want to be a leader that most of us don't take time to do in our daily lives. We get really caught up in work and just getting things done and just living. But having that intentional space to reflect on yourself and your values and the way you want to be a leader, I think is so important that if you're even thinking about doing it, just do it.
Thanks for that plug.
Yeah.
We had so much fun. We had such a great group.
That was great. And it was perfectly timed. Actually, like perfectly timed.
a lot of women who had never taken a leadership course before, and we were all in COVID. That's when we started it. And just to have that space and community as we move through that, even that piece of it. Well, so I am going to post. So if anyone out there wants to learn more about the peak leadership experience or my executive coaching, the best place to go is the website, which is easy. It's just mindovermountains.com. And you can find links to programs. There's a webinar you can watch to learn more. And also, if you go to a coaching page, there's a free discovery call. I always leave time to have calls with women. So if you want to talk about your career, what's going on, what your challenges are, where you want to go and how to get there, I'm happy to do that. So I will write Mind Over Mountains in the little checkbox. Whoopsie. This navigating technology here is always my greatest. Okay, here we go. Going in the box. There we go. All right. So Alison, thank you so much for coming. It's really nice to spend some time with you and reconnect and really hear your inspiring story. So I'm glad that you're back outside leading your people.
Yes, me too. Thank you so much for having me on, Kim.
That was a lot of fun. Take care.
You too.